Hi there, this is Dr. Everybody with Project 5. Now, starting with Project 5, we're going to see the projects start to get a little more complicated. They'll take a little more time. That's no big surprise there. One of the things that we do in many of these projects is we take some data, we do some analysis, and we print things out. And in this case, we're looking at sales, advertisements and sales, and we're going to look for which ad has the most sales, and then also look at the return on the investment. And we give you the formulas for that. But there is this pattern: read some data, do some calculations, and then display the results that you have. In this case, we have fake data. Next time around, we'll actually start getting into real data, which tends to be a little messier. So in this case, we're doing fake data, so we avoid the messiness that we get with real data. So what we have here is are these products out of a game, as it turns out, and we are going to go through the file and figure out for a particular product what ads work best. So imagine we're a company, we're buying some ads. Which ones actually work best for us? Which one gave us the most sales? Which one gave us the best benefit return on investment? And our files are relatively small, although we expect that your program, or I should say we require that your program handle much bigger files. So you can't just assume, oh, there's just 3 of them here, or whatever it is. And the idea goes like this. So let's actually take a look at the input file. So the input file has things, and this is all described, that it has like the name of the product, the types of ads being used, and some other values. And one of the things that we're interested in, for example, is sales. And the products are always together. So if I'm looking at here at the Pip-Boy 2000 and I'm looking at sales, then I'm looking at these values and which one has the largest, and it's that one. All right, 5,013. These other values get used in terms of return on investment. I'll get to that in a moment. So the idea is just go through here and pick the biggest one and keep track of the fact that that's the information associated with this whole line here. Now, that part is familiar to you. The challenge, as it turns out, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a moment, is how do I find when I have switched from this particular product to the next product, and so on down to the the next product? And that's figuring out where that line is. It turns out to be kind of the trickiest part of this assignment, and I'll take a look at that for you in a moment. And what we'll do is the way to figure this out is just concentrate on this first column. Can I print out once just Pip-Boy 2000, and then once print out Mr. Handy, and then once print out a Braxo scouring powder? And that's a little bit of a challenge. Once you can do that, doing this part is is something similar to what you have done before. Now, I mentioned here that in this case we were looking at sales, and then some of the other information here is calculates return on investment. So let's take a look at that. In the description, we actually require you to have some functions, and the functions are in the skeleton that we give you. And one of the functions, I'll work backwards. There's the open file one. All right, we always have one of those. But there's one to calculate the return on investment. And what's a return on investment? Well, it involves revenue and cost of goods sold. Well, The revenue is what comes out of this function. And that function is relatively simple. Excuse me. It can in fact be done in one line. Cost of goods sold. Now there's another, there's that, and that comes out of this function, cost of goods sold function. And again, that's a relatively simple function. So this calculate return on investment calls both of those two functions and does some relatively simple arithmetic on it. And there's the return on investment for your particular for a particular product. All right. So that's just some calculations that you have to do. Relatively straightforward. So I had mentioned that the interesting thing is how do I go from one to the other. So here's the skeleton file that we gave you, and just to get started on this, this is not the correct open file. I'm just going to open test case number 2, return the pointer. I call the file there, and our instructions here say to read the file and extract the data. Now how might I go about doing that? Well, I can say something like for line in my FP. I can print the line. By the way, I always start this way. If I'll always test this out, because if this works, then I know I'm reading my file correctly, and I can see what the data looks like. And so, okay, the data comes out fine. If we go back and look at our instructions, that it tells us that there are, the way my file is set up, the first 2 columns are 27 characters wide. So if I'm looking for the product name, I know I am looking at 27 characters. So I find it handy to strip off the carriage return at the end, and then my product is simply the first 27 characters. And you can slice out the rest, but let's print the product. Let me see how I'm doing. Notice a few lines of code, and let's see how we're doing. And there we go, as expected. I get the 4 lines of the Pip-Boy, the 3 lines of the Mr. Handy, and then 2 lines of the scouring powder. The next step that I would like to do is think about how we transition from one to the next. So how do I know that I'm done with the Pip-Boys and I'm starting with Mr. Handy? Well, I know that only on this line. So I know that these have changed when I've gotten to Mr. Handy. That means I'm done with the Pip-Boys. So you have to read this line to then know to take care of whatever you had to do for the Pip-Boys, like find the product with the most sales. Right? So we have to read that next one, and how do I know? Well, it's the name of the product changed. So I need to have something. I need to keep track of, here it is. I have my product. Well, let's keep track of the previous product. If I keep track of the previous product and then I read the product here, I know that they've changed when I just read the product, and I can then compare it to the previous one, and if they're not equal, then I know that I have changed. And at that point, I want to print out the information like, oh, here's the maximum sales that I've found at this point. And that, you know, and so the very first thing that you want to do is, at this point, is print out what you really want is previous product. And that should be, and you want to just do that once. Once you could do this, okay, then you will know that at the point that you're getting this print, that's the point at which you want to print out all the information about the previous product. So what I've outlined here is a way to go about finding that line. And let me show this to you in a different way. Imagine that I have a product. I'll just call it A, and let's say it has some value like 5. And then we have some product B. And then we have some product C. And then we have some product D. So what I would like to do is I'd like to go through here and identify this point right there where I've switched from one to another. And let's suppose I'm just going to keep the sun. So how do I know that I'm done with A's? I know it when I've read my B's. Right. And then at that point, I want to print out the sum of those. So the basic idea is to have, oops, that's not what I want to do. I want to, not the current one, I want to say the previous product. Well, it has to start out with something initially. What was the previous product before we got to the A's? Well, if we're dealing with strings, let's just make it empty. And then I have my for loop doing something. And what do I want to say? So I want to say, you know, I'm gonna figure out what my product is, equals something. We've already done that. You might slice that out. And the key part is here, is that as soon as my current product is not equal to my previous product, then this is when I want to do all my work. At this point, I'll just print my previous product. All right. So if they're not equal, then I will print it. And so what does that mean? I'm going down here, and I started out, my previous product was empty. I get it, now my product is going to be A. So let's make a little thing up here. So I have two pieces of memory. I've got my product. We'll stick it in here, and my previous. I'll stick it in here. And we start out with, initially that's empty. And product, I come down here, so it was empty, so there we go. We start reading the products. First product I get is A. And then, oops, I need to update my previous product. Well, if they aren't the same, then previous product equals product. All right. And so previous product equals product, that's A. And then, so I'm done with that line. Now we come down to this line. We read it again. we get A again. Are these different? The answer is no. And so we update that. That becomes A. Now we go and read the next one. That's an A. Are they different? A and A? Nope, they're not different. And so we assign previous product to be product. All right. Now we come down, and here's where it gets interesting. I read product, and now that becomes B. I do my comparison. Are B and A the same? No, they're not. So I print previous product, which means I print an A. So I read this line here, and I printed an A. And if I've been keeping track of a sum, at this point I could print the sum, and I could print out, say, the 22 that went along with that. Now notice as we go along, all right, I get done with this, and I say, you know, well, I better update, you know, my previous product. That now equals the product. I always want to do that. So now this becomes a B. So now I start going through here until I get to the C, and in which case my C and my B will be different, and I can print out my B and the value that goes along with that. What you will find now is don't forget about the last guy, because the last guy can get lost in here, because remember, we're printing when it changes. So at the very end, when I'm done with this loop, I still have to remember to do this last guy. A couple of things I can do. One is I can do use the else that goes along with the for, and in here I can take care of the final guy. So there's a little bit of an idea of how you can go through keeping track of this transition here between the products, and hopefully that gives you enough of a clue on how to handle this particular situation. With that, good luck.